Good afternoon, everybody. I know it's been a big day, so you're probably looking forward to getting home, but I wanted to come and join you mainly to say thank you for what you do. I think for many of the issues the country faces are better if people have some understanding of economics, whether it's how to deal with climate change or how to get wages going again, how to boost people's real living standards, even how to design the NDIS. These are all things that benefit from an understanding of economics, and you teachers are really at the front line of generating the economic knowledge in the country, and I think if as students in high school learn some economics, the country in the end is going to be a better place. So thank you very much for what you do. The RBA is very keen to support you in however it can. Days like today are part of that, and on our website, I hope you know, there are a whole bunch of resources. I'm told the chart pack is very popular. It's one of our main resources. Even when my son was studying economics, he kind of said the chart pack was useful. So maybe not talking to me wasn't that useful, but the chart pack was. So I hope you value that, and there are a lot of other resources on our website as well. So we're keen to do what we can to help you, because you're playing an important role in educating the next generation of economists. And if you've got ideas for things that we can do to help you, then you should be in contact with Jackie's team. I know from my first-hand experience just how powerful the influence of a good teacher can be. I started studying economics in year 11 at high school. I went to high school in Wagga in southern New South Wales, and I had a really fabulous teacher there by the name of Mrs. King, who taught economics, and I did commerce up to year 10, and I thought I would try economics, and it was truly fantastic. I liked it so much that you could do 3 in economics in those days. Sadly, you can't do that anymore. You should be able to, and when you did 3 in economics, you could actually do maths and differentiation and maximise functions in economics. I know a lot of kids don't like doing that, but when I was in year 11 and 12, I liked doing that. So you can't, unfortunately, you can't do that, but back when I was at high school, you could. But not just the differentiation. What I was really intrigued about was the general principle of economics, is at how to maximise the collective welfare of the society, and the idea that you could have some combination of the invisible hand of the market and government regulation come together to produce the biggest pie for society and to distribute that pie in a way that maximised our collective welfare. So I found, as a young person, that idea incredibly powerful. I said, this is kind of really cool that kind of, a country like Australia with 25 million people now, people working independently, guided by the invisible hand of the market in an environment established by the government, can actually create fabulous prosperity and a high standard of living that we now enjoy. So just understanding how that worked, how we collectively maximised welfare, was something that I really found powerful, and Mrs. King was able to bring that concept alive. She was able to talk about how it could be applied to real-world problems. And I know when I was in year 11 and 12, and I'm sure you do this today, you're kind of looking at the newspapers all the time, and well, maybe it's not newspapers, it's online, and being able to apply what we learned in the classroom to issues that my parents were talking about. So I thought it was really cool. I thought it was so cool that I ended up studying 8 years of economics. I did 4 years here at the University of New South Wales, and then 4 years at MIT in the United States. So not everyone's going to have that same journey, but that spark that was ignited by a teacher has led me to where I am now. I've been at the Reserve Bank for 42 years. It's a long time. But it was all because of what I started learning in year 11 and 12 from a fantastic, dedicated and passionate teacher And the fact that you're still sitting here at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, when it's not raining in Sydney, suggests that you're kind of passionate about what you're doing and stimulating the next generation of economists. So thank you for taking the time out of I'm sure it's busy time. I think it's school holidays now, is it? So thank you for taking time out of your holidays to come here and be with us. When I was in Year 12, that was 1979, the main topic that we were learning about besides welfare maximisation was high inflation. I was learning about how high inflation was corrosive of the welfare of the society. It particularly hurt lower income people, made it harder for firms to plan and invest, and it eroded people's real income. So that was what I was learning in 1979, and I remember writing essays on the government's Fight Inflation First policy. After that, probably for the last 20 years, you probably haven't had to teach that much about inflation in your classrooms, have you? It was something of the past, something of the 1970s or maybe the 1980s. People weren't really paying attention to kind of prices, inflation of prices, and they didn't really have to very much. But now I wish I'd kept some of those HSC lessons, the essays that I wrote. I must have written some good ones because I got a very high score. So I wish I'd kept some of them because I thought they might have come in useful for the challenges that I'm currently facing. But the world's very different from the 1970s, so I'm not quite sure how useful they would be. But it's interesting how the same things keep on coming back around. I didn't think as my term of governor that I would have to deal with a period of high inflation, but yet here we are. So it's not just the inflation environment that's changed. How monetary policy has changed as well. Probably wasn't that long ago you were teaching in the classrooms that monetary policy works through open market operations, the central bank buying and selling government bonds to control the money supply. I know when my oldest son was studying economics, that was he was learning, and I was saying, no, that's not how it works. And he's going, but no, that's in the textbook. So that's what 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years ago you may have been teaching. I hope if you're teaching that now, you're kind of moving beyond that and saying it's more about control of the short-term interest rate, and I assume that you've kind of talked about that today. In the last couple of years, if you've teaching contemporary monetary policy, you would have also had to talk about bond purchase programs and yield targets, quantitative easing, the term funding facility, maybe even the consequences of the zero lower bound on interest rates. So monetary policy has become much more interesting than just buying and selling government bonds to control the monetary base. So I'm sure that's made it a more complicated world for you in the classroom. I hope it's made it from a more interesting world as well, but it's certainly made from a more complicated world. And some things change a lot, but inflation keeps coming back, so that's a constant. Another constant, and one thing that really hasn't changed, is the objectives of the Reserve Bank. And I hope you've covered those today. Those objectives are full employment, price stability, and the economic welfare of the Australian people. And I personally like that because it connects back to what I learnt in high school in 78 and 79 in Wagga, that economics was really about welfare maximisation. And the organisation that I'm privileged enough to lead now actually has that as one of its core legislated mandates, to maximise the welfare of the Australian people. So that legislation was written back in 1959. Most other central banks don't have the maximisation of the welfare of the people in the objectives, but we have that, and I really value that, because at the heart, that's what we do. The organisation that I'm part of, that's what we talk about all the time. Our job is to serve the 25 million people who live in Australia and to maximise our collective welfare. Not everyone agrees with what we do, and I was just sitting out there before I came in reading my correspondence from the public this afternoon. It wasn't very flattering. And the last one ended up, I just read an email, she said, I normally wouldn't say this, but you really suck. So, you know, not everyone agrees with what we do, and but what we're always talking about internally and what we do our best to do is to maximise the welfare of the people who live in Australia. As you might know, we're about to have a review of the Reserve Bank and Australia's monetary policy arrangements. And I'm talking to the Treasurer about the scope and nature of that review, and we've almost got to a point where the government, I think in a few weeks' time, will announce the structure and nature of that review. I think it's something that it's timely, it's something we welcome. Some parts of the world are moving and others aren't, other things aren't, but it's important we keep on looking at other people's countries' experience and learn. So I'm looking forward to participating in that. One of the things that the review will do, we'll look at the objectives of the Reserve Bank. This legislation that was written in 1959, full employment, price stability and the welfare of the Australian people. I think it's appropriate we look at that, but from my perspective, there are going to have to be pretty good arguments to change those objectives, because that's what you want. Price stability, full employment, the welfare of the people. We could talk about financial stability being part of that as well, because that wasn't such a big issue back in the 50s, but those core elements of our objectives are fundamentally important, and maybe we can fine-tune them, but I can't imagine a world where they're fundamentally shifted. So that review will start in a few weeks' time probably, and hopefully complete in the first half of next year. So it'll be helpful for us. I hope it'll be helpful for you too, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of good material in that for your students doing the HSC next year. Maybe even an exam question. I don't know. So there'll be a lot of material there for you to work through, and hopefully in a similar session next year we can use some of that material in these sessions. So I'll stop there. Just again, thank you for what you do. It's incredibly important what you do, not just in the short term for your students, but for the future of the country, because we need people who understand and appreciate economics, even if they're not going to spend 42 years in the central bank like me. I understand that's a unique thing, but what isn't unique is the importance of understanding economics, at least a basic and rudimentary understanding, and hopefully you're giving your students at least that and a bit more.